There are things you tell yourself about institutions, that they are slow, not cruel, that the paperwork is an accident, not a weapon, that the committee members who signed the order did not understand, quite, what they were signing. I told myself those things for 9 years. I stopped the morning I read the intake log. I was 17 years into my posting at the Sorvin Deliberative Compact, when the scientific inner body, the Methodological Review Directorate, 11 members, no public gallery, no transcript, convened its reclassification hearing for Dr. Asha Marin. I was there in my capacity as a senior liaison attaché. I had a desk in the corridor outside the chamber. I had been given a summary. I had not been given a chair inside. That is how it works, at the directorate level. You are present enough to sign the forms, not present enough to object to them. The summary told me this. Dr. Asha Marin, Human Research Specialist, seconded to the Compact's Theoretical Applications Division 14 years prior, had been reclassified to Category 8, cognitively non-functional, incapable of independent filing or legal correspondence, following an incident during an experiment the Directorate itself had commissioned. She had been held in the Compact's medical evaluation facility on Station Vale Oren for 7 years. The reclassification hearing today was to ratify the Category 8 finding on a permanent basis, closing her case record. I read the summary twice. Then I read it a third time, more slowly. The Category 8 designation, under the Compact's scientific registration framework, requires the named individual to have a designated filing agent for the duration of the classification. The filing agent receives any legal correspondence on the individual's behalf and holds their correspondence address of record. The summary listed Dr. Marin's filing agent. She had designated herself, under her original research credentials, which were never formally revoked, because revocation under Category 8 requires the subject to be notified in writing, and written notification requires a valid correspondent address, and the only address on file for Dr. Asha Marin at the time of classification was the intake office at Station Vale Oren. The Compact's own intake office, where she was being held. I sat with that for a long time. The corridor was quiet. The Directorate inside was doing what the Directorate did, reading citations, entering motions, preparing to close a case record on a woman no one had spoken to in 7 years. The chamber door opened. I recognized her from the file photograph, though the photograph was 14 years old, and she was not. She walked without assistance. She was wearing a civilian research coat, her original Compact credentials clipped at the collar, still valid, I noted, because they had never been revoked, and she was carrying a physical binder, the kind the Compact used for formal submissions, gray cover, binding tape along the spine. The tape was worn, the binder was thick. She walked past me without looking at me. She pushed the chamber door open with the flat of her hand and walked through it. I heard the room change. Not voices. The Directorate was too composed for that, too careful with its own record of decorum. What I heard was the specific silence of 11 people stopping what they were doing at the same moment. I did not go in. I had not been given a chair. What I know of the next 11 minutes I pieced together afterward from the intake log, the Compact's procedural disclosure protocols, and one conversation with the Directorate's junior filing clerk, a young Solvari named Essen Varl, who I think will spend the rest of his career trying to forget what he watched. She placed the binder on the table. She did not speak. The Directorate's presiding member, Sorath Keln, asked her to identify herself for the record. She opened the binder to the first page and turned it to face him. Keln looked at it, then at her, then back at the page. The binder contained 847 filed observations. Each one bore the Compact's own intake timestamp. Each one had been received by the Compact's scientific registration intake system, the same system that logged all official correspondence, processed, confirmed, and filed to the case record she was currently the subject of, under the case number that had been opened for her the day she was first classified. Her filing agent address was the intake office at Station Vale Oren. Her filing agent was herself. Every document she filed from inside that station had been received, logged, timestamped, and entered, not by a person, by the system that the Directorate itself used, the system that the Directorate itself trusted, 847 times in 7 years. The observations ranged from technical, methodological critiques of the Directorate's published experimental frameworks, 3 of which had been adopted by the Directorate's own review panels without attribution, to administrative, formal objections to the conditions of her evaluation, to the classification itself, to the experimental commission that had preceded it, to the identities of the 11 members who had signed the original order, with citations. She had been filing objections to Sorath-Keln personally since the 14th month of her confinement. Every one of them bore the compact's intake timestamp. Every one of them was in the case record. The reclassification hearing was a formal proceeding of record, which meant that the moment the hearing opened, everything in the case record entered permanent status. She had not filed those documents to get out. She had not filed them because she believed anyone was reading them. The intake system does not read. It receives, timestamps, and files. She filed them because she is a scientist. Because she documented what was being done to her the same way she had documented everything else in her career, methodically, without embellishment, with complete citations. Because somewhere in 7 years of Category 8, she decided that if the record was going to be used against her, she was going to make sure the record was complete. She closed the binder. She picked it up. She walked out. I was still in the corridor. She passed me the same way she had entered. No hesitation. No pause. Nothing in her face I could name. The binder was under her arm. She had left nothing on the table. She had not needed to. The permanent record already had everything. I filed my liaison report 3 days later. I wrote what I observed. I noted the intake timestamps. I noted the case number. I noted that 847 filed documents had entered permanent status in the Directorate's own archive on the day of the hearing, and that 3 of the methodological critiques contained therein had been published, without attribution, in the Directorate's own review journals in years 4, 5, and 6 of Dr. Marin's classification. I noted that the reclassification to permanent Category 8 had not been entered. The motion had not been called. I have been retired 9 years now. I do not know what became of Sorath-Keln. I have not looked. There are things I prefer not to know the details of, when I suspect the details will not improve my opinion of them. What I know is this. The Directorate commissioned an experiment. The experiment did not produce the result they expected. They signed a confinement order and called it a reclassification, and told themselves the case was closed. They forgot, or perhaps they never understood, that the framework they used to close the case was the same framework she used to file inside it. That the address they had on record for her was their own intake office. That their own system does not distinguish between correspondence from inside the facility and correspondence from outside it. It receives, it timestamps, it files. For 7 years, while the Directorate met and published and moved on, their intake system was logging her. 847 entries. I think about Station Vale Oren sometimes, the intake office in particular, the quiet of a system that simply does what it was built to do, receive, timestamp, file, without judgment, without hierarchy, without the particular kind of blindness that comes from being certain that the person in the room is no longer a person worth watching. She knew they were not watching. That was the whole point. She did not walk out of that chamber with anything she had not already entered into the record years before she arrived. The chamber was a formality. The record was the work. The record had been the work since month 1. I spent a long time afterward being angry at myself for the 17 years I had spent inside the compact, assuming that the categories it assigned to things were the categories they occupied. Category 8. Cognitively non-functional, incapable of independent filing. I had read that summary in the corridor and understood it the way the Directorate intended me to understand it, as a description of a person. It was not. It was a description of what the Directorate needed her to be. There is a difference. I was 51 years old before I learned to notice it. When she passed me in the corridor the second time, I almost spoke. I do not know what I would have said. There is nothing adequate to the specific weight of watching someone walk out of a room where 11 people have just understood, all at once, that 7 years of silence was not absence. It was accumulation. I did not speak. She did not look back. The door at the end of the corridor was propped open. Light came through it. The particular flat white light of a transit station in early shift. She walked into it and was gone. The Directorate did not request a second hearing.